We've talked about seeing mechanisms, so now let's go over how to maybe take advantage of them, and most importantly, how to break them, by using more examples, because Chapter 1 of the Jojolands, and just about every arc after that, have been putting a mechanism Jojo relies on in jeopardy to secretly show us the different ways a mechanism can fall apart, while hinting that it will do this eventually. The secret to make the most of mechanisms is that the more specific they are, the more vulnerable they are, because they're taking everyone's actions and intentions into account, including yours, and analyzing the outcome of everybody's goals interfering with each other, so you know to shift what you individually do based on what will change your role within that mechanism while still keeping it stable, so you benefit from it continuing to happen. The more specific a way everybody's behaviors cause a wider trend that benefits you, the easier it is to disrupt that cycle, so you want to make sure other people don't catch on to the opportunity you're moving your position around. This is why it's a problem to see your relationships with others as mechanisms as well. Forming your attachments based on their overarching values makes them hierarchical and predatory, because now that your actions with people revolve around how your perspective prioritizes your agenda, the various decisions you'll make and plans you'll enact will be accounting for their feelings and crushing their potential, so all their possible outcomes are rigged to fit one goal. That being said, people can be motivated to team up with others because of their agendas. There's good chemistry that can happen between people who only give each other a chance because there's something they want out of their teamwork. You just have to make sure that those agendas are how you meet people, but then within that relationship, on the inside, you're looking out for each other. The outer shell can be a negative if the inside is a positive. Usagi's not a bad person, even if he has a King Crimson stand for having the same personality trait that made Diavolo a villain. He approaches interactions with others through an agenda, but it's only because he wants a sincere relationship with them and is just desperate to do whatever it takes to get that in the first place. Then you've got Charming Man, whose own agenda made him an enemy at first, but then turned him into a super reliable ally once he got to know the team. And he's also an example of why maybe it's good to have some moderation when breaking things down into mechanisms. When people are fighting each other for exclusive spots in a rat race, they're spending energy counteracting each other for a supposedly guaranteed reward instead of working together to look for a new solution that everybody can benefit from. They're spending limited potential and opportunities doing something that isn't putting in the effort to try to achieve a net positive, which means it's a net negative. You gotta be a mix of selfish and altruistic because your perspective is anchored to your own well-being, even if everybody shares a common goal. But when there's an emergency or something unprecedented that you don't have time to learn all the facts for, what matters is that you prioritize the altruism and regulate your behavior in a crisis over the selfishness. If everybody's like Spider-Man, nobody needs to spread themselves thin. And that's a core idea inspiring the Steel Ball Run continuity. If there's a hypothetical common good, but everybody acts from a place of selfishness to reach it because they can't be omniscient, so they can only evaluate the world and do good proportional to their own point of view, there will always be a crossroad where you can be selfish and take what looks like an easy way out for the specific people you care about, even if it contributes to a bad cycle and is a net negative on the world. Or you can put your own security aside and take the chance to search for an answer that benefits everyone as a net positive, prioritizing the people who might need it the most in principle over yourself, no matter how serious the threat you face would be, and you don't know which choice is the right answer in any circumstance. Everyone else will also be at that crossroad and make different decisions when they can, because you need a balance which counteracts any net positive you try to achieve, unless some sort of regulation is in place. So even though there's a necessary balance between selfish and altruistic, if human actions are the only ways to solve the world's problems, the positions where people can be selfish and where they can be altruistic should be different from each other. The nucleus or systemic foundation of the world should be based on causing that altruism, so that it's okay for people to individually choose moments of selfishness around it. A big belief of the Steel Ball Run trilogy is that the rules have to lean altruistically, so people can lean selfishly. And that's why all the main villains are selfish people who seize opportunities to change those rules by trapping the world in a new system of equivalent exchange, so they can spend effort and energy to steal a portion of the fortune that already exists from other people, which is a net negative because of the loss of energy. Jojo believes that when somebody selfish gains the opportunity to change the rules, so they impose their own layer of selfishness that siphons fortune from others and disrupts the balance, it's up to other regular people who are also selfish to oppose that system and the villain behind it to cause a net positive from another place of selfishness. Because the rules and system have to lean toward altruism, system for the world to remain sustainable. The universe can't repeat in the first place for people to achieve a heaven plan if there's a heat death. And this message is the underlying reason every main JoJo in the Steel Ball Run continuity is given an ability that's a small-scale version of the type of effect the selfish system of equivalent exchange they eventually destroy runs on in their part. It's also why Steel Ball Run itself opens with Sandman. The whole point of his character is that while he's an underdog fighting for the well-being of his people, he's an example of what this new continuity is saying is the wrong thing to do. Sandman's way of dealing with issues is that he tunes out other people and insists on seeing the world one way, so he can take every problem on by himself. He won't listen to advice from the people he cares about, and he'll write off the rest of the world as the enemy, because when he decides on something, he divides his camp from everyone else and won't open his mind to the idea of solidarity, which is a problem because it means that when his loved ones are in danger, he detaches from the common good, which means he can be bribed by a larger villain whose influence comes from maintaining a power disparity by getting people to divide from and waste their energy fighting each other. As long as you start with some advantage, by giving different groups of people vulnerable to your talent of lying the same struggles and turning them against each other, you can lower the bar for what seems valuable to them and bribe them with something that means nothing to you. It's a cycle where by dividing people through underhanded tactics and imposing struggles on them while not having to respect that division yourself, you can reach out to the right person and offer to fix their personal struggle so they do what you need to raise your power, letting you afford to impose more struggles on people and climb higher and higher. If you're someone who immediately close-mindedly goes to fight other people for your own loved ones the moment things get real, if your reflex is to shut out everyone else's possible concerns and only think about prioritizing your own group in a crisis, then no matter how noble your intended goal may be, you're one of the people this cycle can run off of, and you can easily be made an antagonist by the opposite of what you stand for. D4C is this power. Valentine's the type of person who gains power over a civilization by using opportunities and further sacrifices to get groups of people to compete with each other, so even though he's responsible for furthering systemic challenges, he can convince those groups to see themselves as separate worlds and trick individuals into thinking they can join as part of his, even though his society's worldviews will make it so that the slightest pressure will have everybody see them as the initial group they came from again and send them back to their own world. The heart of the power is a larger ideological system Valentine buys into because he believes sacrifice is the essence of the universe and not something you can overcome with open-mindedness and determination, which was why the Corpse Heart was drawn to him. They let people use related abilities, but are drawn to the ones who would be able to manifest those abilities as their own. And so, with his belief in sacrifice, Valentine can keep the system going because those one-sided invisible divisions of the world let him search for a perfect replacement who shares his worldview. Simplifying the whole mechanism for D4C, it's like a lottery. If there are 100,000 struggling people, you can make $1 bajillion off of them by promising to give a single one of them $1 million, since every one of them wants to turn their life around. Then you know this person most likely won't be ready to spend the money responsibly, so they'll be struggling again, and if you use the influence you've gained from being richer, you can push for the economy to be harder to live in, making your followers even more desperate and adding to their numbers. By the way, you should subscribe to the Patreon because I pick a couple questions to answer out of the ones patrons ask every week. In any case, Sandman is tricked because he stubbornly tunes out everyone else and goes about things his own way, which scales to a whole population fighting each other over exclusive goals set by some authority to keep that authority in charge and be able to counteract any rewards by just repeating the cycle and forcing people to run into more and more struggles no matter how far they think they should be moving forward. This happened in Steel Ball Run, it happened in Jojolands, and it's already a major part of the Jojolands. I'm bringing this up for two reasons. Number one, Sandman's cautionary tale, where his flaw of stubbornly immediately fighting for the group he cares about instead of being open to the struggles of other individuals turns him into a sympathetic antagonist, is just like the Sandman from the third Sony Spider-Man movie. And because Jojo likes referencing movie adaptations of IPs, if Hacca Howler is a lot like an inherited curse of the Green Goblin, then it makes you wonder what other kind of villain tied to maybe the Rock Humans might be pulling the strings in Part 9. Maybe something possessive and symbiotic. But number two, there is a continuing mechanism in the Steel Ball Run continuity where if you are trying to obtain an exclusive treasure from somebody else, you're guaranteed to run into a third party doing the same, complicating any heist you may have planned. Changing your position in a mechanism is a net negative on the world because it increases entropy, and destroying the bad cycles behind mechanisms like Love Train and Wonder of You would be a net positive. So the most sustainable way to learn how to take advantage of mechanisms is to learn how to break bad ones. To show how mechanisms are vulnerable, we should go over what makes them stable in the first place. Let's start with the example of the smart student in a class. First impressions are important because everyone's constantly taking information in about the world around them and updating their worldview, so they rely on as many assumptions as they can make to stay on top of everything going on. Situational awareness in general relies on you making as many educated guesses as possible to then respond to the next stimulus. But this means that first impressions are important because when you talk, certain relationships can be established that then reinforce themselves through feedback loops, so they're hard to undo, which lets people fall into specific roles in social settings. The role of the smart person in a class gets formed when the students have initial conversations and quizzes, and a particular student does well. Further conversations make the other students more anxious about their own intellects talking to the student, which trips them up, and some of the other students are incentivized to start conversations to learn something from the outperforming one. And since these conversations reaffirm their role as the smart student, that status feels more and more like it's set in stone, but everyone's abilities are variable and capable of improvement. While first impressions matter, that fact is a mechanism caused by the way a first impression easily chain reacts to create a feedback loop that continues to reinforce itself. Being the smart person in a group fundamentally works by maintaining a level of clarity the dynamic itself initially gives you to see beyond what the rest of the group can do, so you can reaffirm that dynamic in subsequent interactions with the rest of that group. If a teacher gives the impression that one student stands out, an opportunity is wasted because instead of supporting growth, that moment in the class showcases one person besting and beating down another. This feedback loop ends up stunting the other students by easily replacing their frequent but only classroom opportunities to open-mindedly learn and slowly develop their important life skills with moments where they're being evaluated as inferior. So part of what sustains the impression that someone is the smart student in a class is that the rest of the class is being stunted in their regular exchanges. The smart student is also incentivized to stay seen as the smart one, which they can do by wasting the time the other students have to grow smarter by convincing them that intelligence is a simplifiable, competitive stat to spend moments measuring instead. Power scaling is the death of society, because without people realizing it, most of what holds them back from growing beyond what they see themselves as is that the ways they measure those impressions of themselves actively hold those limits in place. Superpositions happen because they're the default, and things are just flattened into specific shapes when there's pressure on them. The only methods we have to detect information are by sending beams out to hit things and collecting their trajectories. So when it seems like something magically changes whenever you don't see it, it's because the way you see it is compromised. When a magician defies all logic and pulls a rabbit out of a hat, they're not breaking reality. It means there's already a blind spot installed in your awareness that the magician's able to slip a rabbit through. We'll get to Usagi later, but as for Hacca Howler, businesses take possession of local resources communities rely on and obscure streams of economic activity to steal from them further. The strength of an invisible monopoly is an eclipse they're able to repeat, but Hacca's power in particular looks like it could be perfect for heists. He seems like the perfect potential teammate, just antagonistic to the main group because both sides are being manipulated to establish goals that are incompatible with each other. And manipulation has a mechanism of its own that makes it hard to spot. If you learn one behavior someone's been using to get away with manipulating you, some personality trait associated with them, or some role they have in your life, and you're able to escape the hold they have and refill the vulnerabilities they carved out, then you're more likely to be manipulated the next time by someone who uses a different method. So a general principle of the world is that if you ever successfully escape a previous person's manipulation in the first place, the next person to manipulate you is not going to be the person you think. If you're really learning from your past, you can't trust your instincts or pattern recognition to tell you who to blame. The more general the effect of a feedback loop that balances out, the more stable the description of its effect, its mechanism, would be. But that doesn't mean something as general as the next person to manipulate you is not going to be the person you think is useless. Mechanisms on this scale are just the trends that, with all additional complications of the world and from their own consequences taken into account, end up stabilizing. There are always other factors of the world you can't account for, but if you're mindful of all mechanisms, you can try to find the biggest mechanisms behind mechanisms and hone your accuracy while waiting for opportunities for different mechanisms to show themselves, because now you're in a position to harness them that people blind to the idea of them wouldn't be. Other people won't even pick up on the fact they exist or the true value of what they see when a mechanism shows itself. At least, this is what Jojo believes, because he thinks that if agency is based on opportunity, people who came generations before him have set systems of power in stone that future generations can't compete with, so rising to the top is a matter of swapping his positions within them whenever he can, instead of defeating them. But the idea that they aren't inherently stable because they're what can be described as stable patterns of activity when all the world's complications repeatedly collide and settle is why he compares them to an ecosystem. There's a level of balance that needs to be maintained from the pieces that are getting it to work in order for it to not be derailed, which is part of why long-term environmental impacts and sustainability are thematically important to the story. It also means that the ecosystems of the pieces that come and go behind mechanisms are susceptible to invasive species, to some kind of third party entering and derailing the whole thing. The rhythm of the group was thrown off and almost destroyed when Charming Man's cats third-partied their heist. New rewards and changes to their agendas are threatening their teamwork, and it's only their compassion for each other that can allow them to survive that derailment. Not every disruptive outside element needs to be a bad thing though. As long as Usagi isn't a plant, the plot and team dynamic revolve around him, because ever since chapter 1, someone new showed up, disrupted the balance of the team, and is now who all of the arcs are derailed by or depend on. But he might be a glue that holds them together in their worst moments. People are not invasive species to other communities. It's larger than human mindsets and agendas they can possess that are the threats to social ecosystems. Maybe some cosmic being at the center of the earth psychically reaches out to humanity and appeals to their greed and ambition in their dreams to get them to build a sewer system to eat kids or recruit a bunch of immortality seekers to its pyramid scheme. But the mindsets and agendas spawned within humans from that entity would be invasive, not the people it's taking over. There wouldn't be humans to really blame for everything in the end, just circumstantial conflicts created by higher, or in this case lower, powers. And whoever the main villain is wouldn't be someone with a sympathetic backstory who made the wrong choice between altruism and selfishness during childhood. That's the secondary antagonist in every Steel Ball Run continuity Jojo's part, because there's a mechanism in the new universe caused by how Jojo loves yes-anding formulas until there are layers of patterns in the storytelling, which is that in every new part, there is one main character who uses a small-scale form of the story's bad mindset and accompanying equivalent exchange, which can be used to eventually undo that larger equivalent exchange and overpower the bad mindset as the main character grows. There's a side character from a completely unorthodox walk of life that derails the main character's initial trajectory and worldview, despite not having the autonomy or independence to do what the main character can, so they use their outside perspective to inform the main character of how they're able to use the spin to escape how they're railroaded. There's an originally empathetic secondary antagonist who goes through some sympathetic moment in their childhood that shapes them into a selfish person who eventually relies on the same mindset as the main antagonist. And there's the main antagonist, who is a dehumanized embodiment of this bad mindset they were pretty much destined to have since birth, and that allows them to draw power from some larger-than-life phenomenon. Hacca Howler, the one we know, lines up with secondary antagonist at best. And being the first outsider to the group doesn't mean the main threat to their teamwork is Usagi, because threats to ecosystems don't always invade from the outside. Sometimes, outside forces appeal to selfish locals who've already seized power within their community to betray it for personal gain, forming a supposedly symbiotic relationship with them to get them to treat their community like livestock in a way that leaves the place they have power over a mess in the long term. If we say that Hacca's power does come from a symbiotic agreement like this, he went through something major as a kid and still struggles with it to this day. What we're looking for is somebody with a deeper philosophy that would have made them willing to enter this type of agreement from the start. And I can only think of one person who would fit that description. TLDR, the best way to take advantage of mechanisms is to break the bad ones that build up, because they're the reasons you'd be struggling and want to take advantage of them in the first place. So you create your own small, independent feedback loops, new elements that things gravitate into like they have weight, to destroy growing clusters of them that act as drain clogs. Flipping this on its head, you can destroy something good like teamwork by creating false possibilities that split people's ambitions and waste their opportunities to challenge their real shared obstacle. If you know the pieces of the ecosystem, you know what new element to introduce to disrupt the balance.